Right. Okay, so just looking at this tilemap stuff, this is just the basic setup I've got. So I've got a map on screen and I've got a character that can move left and right. The map scrolls left and right with the character. Okay? But what we want to do is we want the character to drop if they're in the air, essentially. Now this is obviously only going to work with 2D style games that are side on, because you don't. If you're doing an RPG game, that's not going to be much use to you. Okay. Right. So the first thing we need to do, in order for this to work, the user sprite needs to know what map it's in. Okay, so they can access the map and interrogate the map. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the definition for user sprite, and in its constructor we're going to add another parameter for the map that we're currently working in. So when we create the user sprite, we'll have to tell it what map it's in. Okay, we'll need somewhere to store that. So I'm just going to create a field to dump that in. So current map. So I'm saving that for future reference. Now I'm going to get Visual Studio to do a load of work here. I'm going to make it create stuff so I don't have to type. So I'm going to say right click on that and say generate field, and hopefully it'll have created that field. Where it's put it, I have no idea. Oh, it's down here. I didn't want it down there, so I'm just going to move it and paste it up to the top. Notice it's gone private because it's only the user sprite that needs access to this. Okay, so that's the first job. What I now need to do, if I go back to my setup for my title, which is where I was dumping all this stuff, I've got my level map here. This is where I create it, but I need to keep a reference to it. So I'm going to modify this line to say, okay, let's store a reference when that map is created. Okay, and then we can pass that when we create the user sprite. Okay, so that's some mechanics out of the way. Now, what we need to do is we need to set up, when we update, we need to be constantly checking, are we hitting a tile, should we be falling, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an update, another one for the sprite, to do with collisions, I'm going to call it. Oh, if I put an equals, it'd help. Right, so I'm going to get it to generate that method. Try and get in the habit of putting the XML comments straight in. So this is to do tilemap collisions. Okay. Right, in order for that to work, I need to set up collisions for me tilemap. So I'm going to go to my level map data. So this is my class for my map. This is where I created my tiles. This is where I load the map up. What I need to create is a series of collision tiles. Alright. Now I've got an integer that I've set up called empty, but I'm going to create some more of those. So I'm going to create an array of collision tiles. Now these collision tiles map to the tiles that I've got in the game. Alright, so in my game at the minute I have got this one, which is the background, which is empty, effectively. I've got this one, which is a wall, and I've got this one which I've used as a platform. Now what the collision tiles allows us to do is to treat different visual tiles as the same sort of collision blocks. You can't walk through them or you can't go through them. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to create, I've got empty already, so I'm going to say, right, the first one is empty. Now the easiest way of doing this is to do it on the next line down. Let's tab that back. So I'm going to say, right, empty, and then I'm going to have, oh, put that in there. So I'm going to have a wall, and I'm going to call it I'll call it another wall. I'm being a Burke. I haven't defined this, hang on. I think I'm being stupid. Right, wall doesn't exist. I'm going to create that. And I'm just going to refer to it and give it a number. So I'm going to create that. That'll be up here. So I'm going to refer to that as 1. What have I done there? Oh. Right. If I write it properly, it might make sense. So that just defines a list, so I can match up any that I want. What I can then get to happen is I can create a collision map, which will automatically go through the entire thing with those collision blocks matching up. Collision tiles. So that builds another map that is a replica of the visual map, but with the collision things in place. So anywhere where there was these two, that will be replaced with wall, number 1. Okay. I then use that to interrogate. So when you've got your sliding slope Shazoob, you'll make a special. You still have slope left, slope right. Well, it'll only be those two, won't it? Probably, yeah. Right, okay, back to the user update. The first thing I need to do, what I want to do is I want to know what tile is underneath the player. So in order to do that, I need to get a tile location, which is stored as a point because it's an XY value. Okay, so I'm going to find out from the level map. Now that I've got this reference to the map that I'm running on, I can say my map, collision, tile position I want. Tile position. And I want, you can ask for where a sprite is, but I want specifically. So I want the X position of the sprite, because I want to know what's below the middle of me. And then the bottom of the sprite. Bottom, if I can spell it out. So I want to know what's underneath. So that's the bottom of me plus 1. And that'll give me a tile location. So what tile is that? What tile position in the map? So what I can then do is that I can then interrogate the map and I can say collision item here, and then if I give it that location, tile location, and then there are 2 different methods here. You can look for a specific single tile, or you can look for a list of tiles. I'm just going to look for an empty tile, so that's going to be my map dot empty. So if I find an empty tile I want to drop, okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put braces in there. So I'm going to turn gravity on. That's a way of making the character drop. You'll have to play about with the numbers. If we haven't found an empty tile, we need to turn gravity off and stop the player moving down. So we'll just do an else on that. So gravity dot y equals 0. Obviously y, because when it's dropped that way, you can make gravity go in any direction, doesn't matter. And set the velocity to 0. Okay. Now I've set that to happen before the player does any movement or anything. It might be the wrong place, but you'd have to mess about once you start playing with your game. Okay. Now I've called that collision. What I might rename that to fall. And then I could set up a different routine to do the left and rights. Right, let's just see if that works. So theoretically I should fall. So there's nothing under me and I should stop. Now what you might find is you penetrate tiles. Just turning the velocity off might not be enough. So you might need to like realign. Okay. It looks like that might have penetrated. You can't really see it very well. Okay, so what we might need to do is from that tile location, we want to set the sprite above that. So if we ask the map I can't remember how to do this. I'll have to have a look. Tile position. So that gives me a vector of the upper left hand corner. So that might work. So if I do tile position of that tile, that will give me the upper left corner of the tile that should be below me. Okay. So if I set the Y value of that, and I set my sprite's Y value to that value, I want the Y's bottom. So, right, I've got a sprite helper. So I can say align bottom at that location -1. So up -1. I've done something stupid. Oh, what sprite? Yeah, this sprite, Y. So I'm saying take my sprite, look at this number, sit the bottom of it, so it works out where the bottom of your sprite is. Let's just try that, see if that stops it penetrate. I might have gone the wrong way. It's just slightly up, but that might have been just a drop in. Okay. Now the other thing I ought to do is do a jump to see if I can see if the graphic's actually working. So in my control routine, let's add a key to jump. I'll use the left control. So gm.inputmanager.key pressed. I'm going to do this on keys.left control. If that happens, all I need to do to jump is to give a velocity. So velocity.y equals, now it's going to be a negative velocity because I want to go up. So I'm going to say -300. Again, you have to play back with the numbers to get a system that's going to work. So when I fall onto the floor, let's do a jump. Whee! So the gravity code's working. Obviously I'm never going to get up to those platforms. Obviously that's level design for you. Okay, so just recap. For your user sprite, it needs to be aware of its level that it's working in. So you need to add a parameter to the constructor to be able to pass the map. You then need to save that. So create a field to do that. You then need to set up an update routine to do the falling code. Okay, where we look to see where the tile location is below the sprite. Then we're going to look and say, right, okay, is there an empty tile there? If there is, turn gravity on. That's the easiest way of doing it. And if there isn't an empty tile, turn it off. And we might need to align using the sprite helper. Okay. What we needed to set up for the level map was the collision tiles, which is just a duplicate map using these two bits of code. So we create this list. This is just an array of numbers. I've used constants, well, variables, to represent those so that they make more sense when I read it. So I'm saying the first tile is empty, the next two are walls. They're not, but for this example that's what I left them as. Okay, and then you can detect, once you've created this collision map, specifically any types of things that you want to collide with. Okay. Go back to me setup for me mode. So I've made sure that I've kept a reference. I could have, let's just try it. I could have let's just comment that bit out. I could have done this, possibly. Doesn't look very pretty. Okay, but that would still work. But it looks a bit messy. It's nicer to keep it as a reference. So it does still work. You might want the reference for other things anyway. Okay. The other way round, instead of creating the user sprite there, the other way round to doing that is don't create it there. Don't do that, you fool. Take the user details out. Create your map and make your map responsible for creating the user sprite. So I could have done this. So right at the bottom, once we set everything, we could say new user sprite and pass it our reference to us. Which is probably the better way around of doing it, to be honest. So the level creates the sprite, and it creates all the enemy sprites as well. Okay. Right, I'll stop that and upload that.